The phone call came on a Tuesday. Crisp November air drifted through the kitchen window as I folded dish towels and listened to Joanna's voice, light and rehearsed. Mom, this year we're doing something really small, just us and the kids, you understand, right? She said it like I'd already agreed. I glanced around the room, still smelled faintly of cinnamon from the tea I'd made that morning. My hands paused over the towel. Of course, dear, I replied, and even I couldn't tell if I meant it. After the call ended, I stood for a long while, the silence settling into my bones. Then I opened the freezer and took out a single turkey leg. It was absurd, really. One turkey leg. A far cry from the 20-pound bird I'd once busted at 2 a.m., stuffing its cavity with fresh thyme and onions, whispering to it like it was a guest of honour. That was 1996. I remember because I had borrowed folding chairs from the church to fit everyone, Joanna, her cousins, even the postman's widowed sister. Everyone was welcome. I'd lit candles and tucked hundred-in-place cards under glass plates rimmed in gold. Now I set a table for one. Mismatched china, one of the blue plates, a solitary cloth napkin folded with care. I lit a candle anyway. Habit, I suppose. It flickered against the window, casting my shadow long and thin across the laminate floor. I told myself I was fine, that I'd enjoy the quiet. I hadn't even made pie. Just a slice of pumpkin bread I'd frozen last month. But as I chewed the dry edges, scrolling through my phone to keep my thoughts in check, I saw it. A photo. My niece had pushed it, thankful for the screw, beneath a golden-hued picture of a crowded table. Joanna sat at the centre, beaming, flanked by her husband and kids. Laughter practically burst through the screen. And there, just beyond her shoulder, stood someone I recognised. Margaret from 3 doors down. Wearing the apron I had sewn for Joanna last Christmas, cream linen with a faded turkey print. I knew that apron like I knew my own handwriting. My breath caught. Margaret. A neighbour. Laughing, passing a bowl of stuffing, her elbow nudging Joanna's like they were lifelong kin. I zoomed in. The table was full. Every chair, every plate taken. Just not mine. I stood up without realising it, hands trembling ever so slightly. The room tilted just a little. Not from anger, not yet. But from that old familiar ache of being extra. I thought of the school play when Joanna was 6. She'd forgotten her line in the Thanksgiving skit and froze, a paper pilgrim bonnet slipping over her eyes. I was in the front row, mouthing the words she couldn't find, cheering through tears when she finally said them. Back then I was the person she looked for. Now I was the name they forgot to write. I sent a text short, harmless. Dinner looks lovely. Hope it's warm inside. No reply. The candle burned low. I walked to the hall closet and pulled down the old family album. The pages stuck slightly. My hands, these hands that once peeled 10 pounds of potatoes without a complaint, trembled now. Every photo showed me behind the camera. Later, I found the old place cards. I kept them in a little envelope from the days when I'd assign seats to keep peace between cousins. One card fluttered to the floor. Grandma. The ink faded. This year, no card. No seat. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. My face didn't look angry, just tired. I pulled down a box from the closet, school projects, thank you notes written in crayon, a paper turkey with the words, best Thanksgiving equals Grandma's house, and folded it like scripture. And then, quietly, I wrote a letter. It started, this is not about a chair, it's about being remembered. I didn't send it, but I taped the photo to the fridge, the one with Margaret and the apron and Joanna's smile. Below it I scribbled in pen, that's my family, even if they forgot me. Then I heard the knock. Soft, tentative. I opened the door to find a little girl from next door, her pigtails askew and cheeks pink from the cold. My mom said you should have some pie, she said, holding out a paper plate wrapped in foil. I took it gently. Tell her thank you, I'll save her a seat next year. She grinned, then skipped back down the steps. I closed the door, locked it, and sat at my table for one. Even when there's no room, love finds its way in. It started small, the way these things do. Not with a slammed door or a cruel word, but a glance quaking sideways, the kind that doesn't land where it used to. It was early November, the week the leaves turned brittle. I had invited Joanna and the kids over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just stew in the slow cooker and cornbread from the old tin pan that still bore Arthur's initial scratched into the underside. She'd said yes at first. Even sounded glad. The kids would love that, she'd said. So I'd set the table for 4, washed the placemats, polished the silver I rarely touched anymore. I even pulled out the turkey-shaped salt and pepper shakers, a bit of silliness the children used to love tipping over. But when they arrived an hour late, shoes squeaking on my clean floors, something in the air shifted. "Smells good in here," Joanna said, not taking off her coat. "We actually ate a little already. The kids had mac and cheese in the car. You know how they are." I blinked. "You didn't have to do that. I made the well. It's okay. I'll pack it up." No, sit. It's lovely." She walked around the table, phone still in hand. "I just didn't want to risk a meltdown. You know how crabby Liam gets when he's hungry." Liam didn't look crabby. He looked bored, thumbing at some glowing screen while his sister twirled a napkin into a makeshift fan. I served anyway. Small bowls. Tried not to mind when they only took a few bites. I offered pineapple, Joanna's favourite, but she declined. "We're cutting back on sugar. Plus I have to be up early. Work's been..." She trailed off. A shrug finished the sentence. They stayed maybe 25 minutes. Long enough for me to notice that Joanna never fully sat down. She hovered by the entryway, the hall, the edge of conversation. Her words came quick and clipped, like she was late for something she hadn't told me about. I walked them out to the car. "Thanks, Mom," she said, giving me a brief hug, more of a shoulder tap than an embrace. "Oh, can you send me that stew recipe? I might make it for Mark's parents next week." Something about that stuck. She didn't ask for the pie recipe. Not the cornbread. Just the stew, the one thing they barely touched. When they drove off, I stood in the cold a moment longer than I should have, watching their taillights fade. Back inside, the house felt too quiet. I rinsed the dishes slowly, as if care might transform the evening into something warmer. I wiped down the table, folded the napkins again. I hadn't asked much. Just a little dinner. A little time. Later that night, scrolling through my phone in bed, I saw Joanna's post. A picture of Liam asleep in his car seat, captioned, "Long day, full of bellies, full hearts." No mention of me, of dinner, of the time we'd spent. It wasn't meant to hurt, I'm sure. That's the trick of it. These things don't look like wounds at first. They look like oversight, like forgetfulness, like time moving faster for everyone else. But in the stillness of my room, lit only by the soft glow of my lamp, I felt it. The first chill of being left out. Not entirely. Not yet. Just adjacent. I lay back, the quilt pulled to my chin, and stared at the ceiling. The house creaked softly in the wind. It had never sounded so unfamiliar. It wasn't that they didn't love me. I still believed they did. But love, I was learning, doesn't always take the shape of space at a table or time carved out of busy lives. Sometimes it forgets to call. Sometimes it rushes through dinner. Sometimes it shows up late, full from elsewhere. And sometimes it asks for your recipe so it can be made for someone else. Mornings used to have a rhythm. I'd rise before the sun, boil water in the old kettle that whined just before it sang, and pour it over my favourite tea camel with a slice of dried lemon I'd saved from the last batch I dehydrated myself. Arthur used to say it made the whole house smell like patience. I liked that. I'd sit at the kitchen table, the same one we bought second-hand in 1973, and listen to the silence as if it were music. Back then, silence was a luxury. Now it's more like static. It hums around me with no melody, no pause. These days the phone doesn't ring much. Not unless it's a reminder from the pharmacy or a political survey asking how I feel about taxes. I answer sometimes, just to hear my own voice travel through space and find someone on the other end, even if it's a stranger reading from a script. Joanna used to call on Sundays. Then it became every other. Then not at all unless something needed doing. "Can you take in a package, Mom? Can you check if we left Liam's jacket there? Can you send that recipe again? Never 'How are you, Mom?' Or 'Would you like to come over this week?'" I started writing my name on the calendar in blue pen, called Joanna just to remind myself that it had to come from me. The calls were short. Her voice was always rushing somewhere else. Sometimes she answered with a distracted "Hey, Mom," and nothing more. The last time I tried to tell her about my neighbour passing Miriam, the one who used to bring rhubarb from her garden jar to cut in with. "That's so sad. Anyway, have you tried that online grocery delivery yet? You'd love it." I didn't respond. I just nodded into the silence, even though she couldn't see it. My routines have grown quiet around me. I still make meals as if someone might walk through the door hungry. a small roast on Sunday, soup from scratch on Tuesdays. Even when I know it'll be just me, I set a place, light a candle, and sit with it until the flame flickers down. The table has never looked so wide. I used to bake every Friday banana bread, pumpkin muffins, whatever was on hand. I'd wrap half and leave it on Joanna's porch with the kids. But the last few times, it just sat there untouched. Once I found a note in different handwriting, thanks but no thanks, food sensitivities. So I stopped. I now bake one small ramekin at a time. Just enough for me. No leftovers, no sharing. I haven't used my pie dish in months. Even the mail feels thinner. Holiday cards don't come like they used to. Last year, Joanna sent an e-card. No envelope. No furbo. Just animated holly and a song that got off halfway through. I watched it twice, then closed the laptop gently, like it might bruise. I walk every morning 3 loops around the block, not for exercise, but for a reminder. The trees still change. The air still bites. Sometimes I pass Margaret walking her dog and we nod, but that's all. The world keeps moving even when no one's watching. Inside the house, I dust things that don't need dusting. Rearrange books I've already read. There's a spot on the windowsill where Joanna's handprint once pressed when she was 5, helping me make cranberry sauce. The smudge is long gone, but I still glance at that space like it holds something sacred. I keep a drawer of things I don't open, often drawings from the kids, old recipes, the place cards from Thanksgivings past. Last week I found the one with my name. Grandma. It used to sit at the head of the table. This year they're not making cards. They're keeping it simple. I told Joanna I could still bring a dish. You don't need to fuss, she said. I told her I'd love to see the kids. They've got so much going on, it might just be easier this way. I asked if I could drop by, even just for a slice of pie. Let's play it by ear, she replied. It's all kind of last minute. Every answer was soft. Polite. Padded with words like maybe and later and next time. None of them meant yes. That's how it happens. You don't get told outright. No one says you're not welcome. They just let time pass. Let calls dwindle. Let chairs go unassigned. You get erased gently. Like chalk from a sidewalk. Like a name at the bottom of a guest list someone meant to invite but didn't. It was Thanksgiving 1996. The year we borrowed folding chairs from the church and wedged them into every corner of the dining room and living room. The year the turkey was too big for the oven and I had to turn it twice, balancing it like a newborn across hot mitts, trying not to tip the pan. Joanna was 12 then. She still wore her hair in a single braid down her back and insisted on setting the table herself. She made hand-drawn place cards with little turkeys on them, one for each guest, even the pastor's wife who we invited last minute because her husband had to fly out of town. Mark had made us send a piece out of pine cones and construction paper. He was 10 and covered in glue by the time he was done, but I let him sit it right in the middle of the table like it was Waterford crystal. Arthur carved the turkey. Not because he was better at it, he mangled it every year, but because the kids liked how he'd make a show of it. Look at that bird, he'd say, wide-eyed, as if it had flown onto the platter by itself. The children would laugh every time. We had 23 people that year. Friends, family, the neighbour whose husband had just left, and a new couple from church who didn't know anyone in town. They brought a sweet potato casserole with tiny marshmallows on top, and when I offered to scoop seconds, the woman whispered, "No one's ever invited us before." We didn't know what to bring. There was room. Always room. I didn't sit much that day. I moved from the oven to the sink to the table and back again, but I didn't mind. I was in everything. Every bite, every laugh, every hand I brushed passing a bowl. That's what love looked like then, not because of gifts, but participation. Being essential to the machinery of the moment. At one point, Joanna tugged my sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, everyone's smiling. She said it like it was magic I had conjured. Like I had caused happiness with cranberry sauce and mismatched napkins. And maybe I had. That night, after the last chair was folded and the last plate rinsed, Arthur and I sat with mugs of tea, our feet aching. He patted my hand and said, "You made the house feel like a home today." I can still hear it. That deep gravelly softness in his voice. He didn't say things like that often. But when he did, they stuck. We didn't have much back then. The wallpaper peeled in the corners and the radiator clicked like it had secrets. But that table crowned with elbows and stores was the richest place I'd ever known. The years rolled forward. Arthur passed in 2003. Joanna married Mark in 2008. The kids came. So did granite countertops and smartphones, and we're doing something smaller this year, Mom. But I remember that Thanksgiving like it was stitched into my skin. The warmth, the laughter, the feeling of being central, of being seen. Now the house is cleaner, quieter. Everything has its place. And no one asks me for my stuffing recipe anymore. They look for ideas online. They buy pies from the market. They say, don't go to the trouble. But I still remember how trouble once meant care. How noise once meant love. How that long, battered table once held the best version of my life. It was the Monday before Thanksgiving when the phone rang. For a moment, just a breath of time, I let myself imagine it was Joanna. Maybe plans had changed. Maybe someone remembered. I didn't rush. I didn't want to seem eager even in my own kitchen. I wiped my hands in the dish towel, straightened my sweater. Then I picked up the receiver like I used to in the days when a phone call was a conversation, not a formality. It wasn't Joanna. It was Liam, my grandson. 12 years old, polite in that new, slightly strained way boys get when their voices start to change. Hi, Grandma. My heart softened. Liam, what a surprise. He hesitated. Mom said to call and ask what kind of pie you like. She's doing a dessert sampler, just for fun. My hand tightened on the receiver. A dessert sampler? I repeated, trying to sound curious, not cautious. Yeah, she's making little versions of everyone's favourite pies for Thursday. There was a pause, long enough to feel it. But I thought... I swallowed, cleared my throat gently. I thought it was just going to be Will and the kids this year. Small. Liam didn't answer right away. I heard rustling. A dog barked in the background. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just us. I mean, Mom's inviting a few people. Uncle Henry, maybe, and Miss Margaret from next door. Not sure. Whoa, I said quietly. He must have noticed something in my tone, because his next words came faster. But she said to ask, so, do you like apple or pumpkin better? I smiled, though no one could see it. Pumpkin, I said. Always pumpkin. Cool, I'll tell her. Okay, bye. Click. The line went dead. I stood there for a long while, the receiver still warm in my hand. The house, so often silent, seemed to echo with something that wasn't sound at all, just the heavy hush of an almost. That was my moment. The breath before a possibility. That soft space where maybe she had changed her mind. Maybe the table would go by one. I even took out the cardigan I'd laid aside the week before, the nice one, pale rose, with mother-of-pearl buttons. I brushed it off, held it to my chest like fabric could answer questions. Maybe they were making room. Maybe they'd remembered. But that Thursday morning, the doorbell never rang. No second call. No come by for dessert. Just the mailman with a flyer and a coupon for denture cream I didn't use. By 3 o'clock, I knew. I had made soup anyway habit, I suppose. Something warm for the afternoon. I ate slowly, staring out the window. The trees were bare now. The lawn a patchwork of leaves I hadn't raked. At 4:15 I checked my phone again. Nothing. At 5 I let myself look at Joanna's social media. And there it was. A photo, soft lighting, warm hues, everyone gathered around a table I once sanded by hand. Pie plates crowded together, whipped cream dollops, smiling faces. Liam holding a fork midair. Mark carving turkey. Joanna laughing beside Margaret, who wore a scarf I'd knit last winter. Pumpkin pie in the centre. Just one plate of it. I closed the app. Gently. Like shutting a book that had changed halfway through. I sat very still. No anger. No tears. Just the slow dimming of something I hadn't realized was still lit. Hope is funny like that. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It lingers, flickering quietly even when you've told yourself not to expect anything. That day, mine went out. Not with drama. Just with stillness. And a single bowl of soup cooling on a table set for one. I didn't do the dishes that night. That might not sound like much, but in this house that's a shift in the earth. For 40 years I've done them after every meal, no matter how small. Even if it was just toast and tea, I'd wash the plate, dry it by hand, place it back in the cupboard just so. But not that night. The soup bowl sat in the sink. The spoon leaned against the porcelain like it had given up too. The light above the stove flickered a bulb I meant to replace weeks ago, but I didn't get the step stool. I just turned it off and left the kitchen dim. I sat at the table instead. Not to eat. Just to sit. The candle I'd lit for the meal had burned itself down to a soft stub. I watched the smoke curl upward and disappear into nothing. Like so many things. I don't know how long I sat there. The clock ticked, the house creaked, but I didn't move. I felt like a shadow, still cast but no longer needed. I used to be full of things. Purpose. Motion. Meaning. I rocked babies to sleep with songs no one sings anymore. I braided hair for school picture days, stitched hands, kissed scraped knees, clipped coupons, baked bread, signed report cards, gold teachers, remembered birthdays, made phone calls to doctors, lawyers, schools. I answered to every need before it was spoken. And now? Now I'm the name that doesn't get written on a place card. The photo frame that gets dusted but not seen. The voice that doesn't get called because voicemail is easier to ignore. I opened the family album again, an old ritual. Something I do when the silence starts pressing too hard. The pages stuck from time and use. My fingers, more careful now than they once were, turned each photo like it might crumble. There I was behind the camera in nearly every shot. Arthur holding Joanna on his shoulders, Mark with chocolate on his chin. Birthday cakes, camping trips, Christmas mornings. I took the photos. I captured the joy. But I was rarely in them. I used to think that was humility. Letting others shine. Letting them be the memory makers. But tonight it just felt like absence. Like evidence that I was always there, but never really in it. Always the backdrop. The frame. The hands that held everything together. But never the reason anyone looked twice. I set the album down and walked to the hall closet. Opened the drawer where I kept small keepsakes, dried flowers, school drawings, a locket with no photo inside anymore. And then I saw it. The apron. Cream linen, faded now, with tiny embroidered holly leaves along the hem. I'd made it for Joanna last Christmas. She hadn't wanted anything, she'd said. So I'd stitched something with care. She wore it this year. Just not for me. She wore it while I ate alone. I held it to my face. It still smelled faintly of lavender from the sachets I tucked in drawers. I don't think she ever noticed that detail. And that was the thing. It wasn't one wound. Not a single moment. It was all the little ones. The forgotten calls. The gifts unopened. The thank yous skipped. The photos never sent. The invitations that became afterthoughts. And worst of all, the slow, careful way they trained me to expect nothing. I hadn't cried in years. I thought I was past that. But in that moment, holding that apron, sitting beside a candle that had burned itself out, I felt it. The ache of a woman who had given everything and been quietly erased in return. Not hated. Not harmed. Just unneeded. The softest kind of exile. The kind you can't name because no one else sees it happening. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling like it might give me an answer. But the ceiling just stared back. And in the silence that followed, something in me settled. Not resolved. Just emptied. I woke the next morning without remembering what day it was. That happens sometimes now. The days don't press with purpose the way they used to. No lunchboxes to pack, no meetings to attend, no grocery lists scribbled in the backs of receipts. Just morning. And a quiet hum of the refrigerator greeting me like an old friend with nothing left to say. But this morning was different. There was something brittle in the air. The light coming through the curtains was thin, pale, like it hadn't fully committed to the day. I sat up slowly, wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, and padded into the kitchen. The soup bowl still sat in the sink. I didn't touch it. Instead, I pulled out the notepad I kept beside the stove, the same one I used to write shopping lists, appointment reminders, favourite quotes. I flipped past pages that still held traces of the past. Dentist, 3 p.m, Mark's choir recital to make extra muffins for school bake sale. All written in my looping, careful script. I found a blank page and sat down at the table. The chair creaked beneath me, a familiar sound, like an old song I hadn't realised I'd missed. And then I began to write. Dear Joanna, this isn't about a chair. It's not about a turkey leg or a pie or a photo I wasn't in. It's about being remembered. The words came slowly at first, but they came. I wrote not to accuse, not to scold, but to speak. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to name what I'd swallowed for years. I told her about the dinners I'd made and the candles I'd lit, the place cards I'd tucked away each year in the hope they'd be needed again. I told her I still wore the apron Liam once spilled cranberry sauce on, because it reminded me of a day when I was still part of the noise. I told her I missed her. And not just her, but the version of her who used to call me from her dorm room crying about finals. The one who asked me to teach her how to fold fitted sheets even though she'd never do it the same way. The one who whispered, "Don't let go yet," the day I walked her down the aisle. I wrote it all. Pages and pages. When I finished, my hand ached and the light had shifted across the kitchen tiles. I sat back, looked at what I'd written, and felt still. Not better. Not worse. Just still. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into an envelope, and placed it on the table. I didn't put a stamp on it. I didn't write her address. I just let it sit there, quiet and full of everything I'd held for too long. And then something changed. Not outside. Not in the kitchen or the world. Just inside me. A quiet click. Like a drawer finally sliding closed. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad in the way I had been. But I was finished pretending that nothing needed to change. Something did. I didn't know what yet. I didn't have a plan, or a speech, or a decision beyond this. I wouldn't keep setting a table no one planned to sit at. I wouldn't keep saving my stories for people who didn't want to hear them. I wouldn't keep shrinking just to fit into the corners of their lives. I didn't need a chair at the table to know I had value. I had my own table. It was scratched, sure, and missing one leg cap. But it had held birthday cakes and Sunday soup and quiet cups of tea. It had heard laughter and grief and everything in between. And it was mine. That was the moment of the shift. Not loud. Just real. Even if no one noticed. Especially because no one noticed. Something in me stood up. Not my body. Not yet. But the part of me that had been sitting for too long. The letter stayed on the table for 2 days. I didn't move it. Didn't reread it. Just let it be, like a sealed jar of something old and preserved truths I wasn't ready to open again. But by the 3rd day I knew what to do. Not with the letter. That would remain folded and sent. No, this wasn't about Joanna anymore. It was about me. It began with the linen box. I hadn't opened it in years. Stored beneath the guest room bed. It held tablecloths too fine for daily use, cloth napkins I'd embroidered before arthritis slowed my fingers, and one small envelope marked in pencil, Thanksgiving place cards. The paper had yellowed, edges curling with age. I tipped the envelope over and watched them spill out dozens of tiny cards, hand-cut, each with a name written in soft ink. Joanna. Mark. Henry. Alice. Paul. Margaret. Each one a snapshot of a different year. A different gathering. And there, near the bottom, I found mine. Grandma. What Mom? Not Mary. Just Grandma. A little crooked. Written by Liam, I think, when he was learning cursive. I ran my thumb over the ridges of the letters. It felt like a gravestone. Like something once true and living, now only commemorated. Then I stood. I carried the box to the kitchen, where the late afternoon light painted gold streaks across the countertop. And I set the table. Not because anyone was coming. Not because I thought they'd change their minds and show up at the last minute. But because I needed to remember that the table had always been mine. I laid out the leaf pattern tablecloth the one Arthur always said was too nice to use, but perfect for today. I placed 2 settings. Not 1. 2. 1 for me. And 1 for whoever I once was. The woman who cooked for 23 people without flinching. Who stitched napkins and took photos and held tears for others. She deserved a place. She wasn't gone. Just forgotten. Mostly by me, I folded the napkins into triangles. Polished the silver. Pulled the dusty candlesticks from the cabinet and placed them side by side like sentinels. Then I made dinner. Not soup. Not a reheated casserole. I roasted a small chicken. Basted it with rosemary and lemon. Made mashed potatoes the way Johnny used to love, with extra butter. I even made green beans with toasted almonds and cranberries. And a pie. Pumpkin, of course. The crust was uneven and I spilled filling onto the edge, but it smelled like the real thing. Like memory. Like dignity. When everything was ready, I lit the candles. I placed the little name card beside my plate grandma, and beside the second plate a blank one. Just a card. A symbol. A space for the parts of meat that still waited to be seen. I sat down. I didn't say grace aloud, but I held the moment in silence. And then I ate. Slowly. Like every bite mattered. Like it was holy. Because it was. When the meal was over, I cleared the plates, wrapped leftovers with care, and finally washed the soup bowl still sitting in the sink. That simple act felt like reclaiming something. A letting go. I folded the tablecloth, placed the name cards back in their envelope, and slipped the blank one into my pocket. I wasn't angry. I wasn't lonely. I was whole. Not because I'd been welcomed, but because I'd remembered I was never supposed to wait for an invitation to exist. I've hosted hundreds of meals in my life. This was the first one I hosted for myself. And it was enough. The next morning I woke to frost in the windows. The kind that blurs the edges of everything. Softens the world into silence. I padded into the kitchen still wearing my slippers, the floor cold beneath my heels. The house was hushed, the scent of rosemary lingering faintly in the air from last night's chicken. The leftovers were packed neatly in the fridge. 2 portions. That second plate had sat untouched, but I didn't throw the food away. I didn't need to. Some things aren't meant to be eaten. They are meant to be honoured. I poured a cup of tea, carried it to the window, and watched the world begin to move. The neighbours across the street were stringing up Christmas lights already too early, really, but I admired their enthusiasm. Margaret's car was gone. Perhaps she'd gone to Joanna's again. I didn't feel the usual twist in my stomach when I thought that. Not this morning. Instead, I reached into the drawer beside the sink and pulled out an old magnet. A photo. Taken 6, maybe 7 years ago. All of us crammed into Joanna's backyard. Liam on my hip, Joanna mid-laugh, Mark holding a sparkler from the barbecue. I was in the middle, arms wrapped around them all. The smile on my face genuine. It was the last picture I remembered where I wasn't behind the camera. I took it off the fridge. The magnet made a soft click as I removed it. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I picked up a pen, and on the white edge of the photo beneath the printed date next to the fading image I wrote, "That's my family." Even if they forgot me, I stared at the words. They weren't bitter. They weren't angry. Just true. Then I walked to the fridge and taped the photo up again, not with a magnet this time, but with a piece of floral washi tape I'd bought years ago and never used. It felt intentional, delicate but firm. A visible mark. A quiet statement. Not to them. To me. Later, as the afternoon light softened, I walked to the hall closet. I took down the small box where I'd kept the unused lace cards and napkins, bits of string, an extra spool of thread for mending things no one wore anymore. And from that box I pulled the blank place card. The one I'd placed beside myself at dinner. And I wrote a name on it. Not Joanna. Not Mark. Not one of the children. Just this. Welcome. Then I tucked it into a tiny silver frame, one I used to keep for school pictures, and placed it at the end of the table. That chair would stay open now. Not for the ones who'd forgotten, but for someone who might arrive. A neighbour. A delivery boy with kind eyes. The mailman who always waves. Or even just the part of myself I've ignored awaiting for permission to be seen. I wasn't keeping the table empty anymore. I wasn't saving the best china just in case. And I was waiting to be remembered. Because I had remembered myself. And I knew now I was never the guest in this life. I was the host. It was just after sunset when I heard it. A soft knock. Not urgent. Not loud. Just enough to be heard over the hum of the refrigerator and the last few notes of the radio drifting from the living room. I wasn't expecting anyone. I set down my tea and walked slowly to the door, smoothing my cardigan without thinking. Habit. The little things you do when someone might see you. When I opened it, there she stood. Maya. The little girl from down the street. No taller than my doorknob, with mittens hanging from her cut sleeves by yawn and a smudge of chocolate on her chin. She held a paper plate in her hands, carefully wrapped in foil. "My mom said you should have some pie," she said, her voice shy but proud. I blinked, taking it gently. The plate was warm. "Pumpkin," she added, beaming. "It's her first time making it without a mix." I smiled, something soft unfolding in my chest. "Tell her thank you," I said. "I'll save her a seat next year." My grin widened. Then, without a word, she turned and bounded down the steps, her boots thumping in rhythm. I closed the door and stood there a moment, plate in hand, the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg curling into the air. It wasn't the pie that moved me. It was the gesture. Small. Unassuming. But real. I set the plate on the table beside the framed place card that still read welcome. I didn't cry. I didn't feel vindicated. Just whole. It was my daughter bringing pie, or my son calling to apologize, or an invitation arriving in the mail. It was something simpler. Proof that kindness still found me even in a quiet house. Even after the forgetting. That's what they don't tell you about growing older. It's not the isolation that stings the most, it's how easy it becomes to believe you no longer matter. But I did. I do. Not because anyone said so. Because I remembered it myself. That night I lit 2 candles. Not for a dinner party. Not for guests who wouldn't come. Just for me. And for the space I'd created for the light I could still offer. I sat down and wrapped the pie and took a bite. It was imperfect. A little runny. The crust slightly overworked. And it was beautiful. I looked around the room, noticing how warm the lamp made the curtains glow, how the shadows curved gently against the walls. My house. My life. Quiet. Yes. But not empty. The family photo was still taped to the fridge. My handwriting beneath it still clear. That's my family. Even if they forgot me. But now I saw something else. The apron on the hook. The chair pulled out just slightly. The extra place card in its silver frame. These weren't remnants of loss anymore. They were declarations. Of presence. Of purpose. I didn't erase myself. They just stopped looking. And now, finally, I had looked back. I saw her, the woman who made everything work. Who fed generations. Who held everyone when they were too tired to stand. Who gave until there was nothing left, then found one more thing to offer. She didn't disappear. She simply waited for me to notice her again. And now I had. I reached for my tea, raised it gently toward the open chair across from me. To those who remember, I whispered. And those who learn how. Then I sipped and the candlelight danced. Even when there's no room. Love finds its way in.